I have long contended that the United Nations is broken. The United Nations General Assembly is an absolute joke. It is a sounding board for radical Islamic groups. And they proved me right this day or yesterday in a way that you cannot believe. They have a Human Rights Council, which in a few years ago included Libya as one of the champions of human rights. And they want to look into war crimes in the Middle East. But who are they coming against? Are they going against the one who's been launching rockets against civilians? Oh, no. They want to have a war crimes investigation against Israel.
The United States and others are trying to negotiate a ceasefire, but right now it looks like there's no end in sight. Chris Mitchell brings us the story.
Hamas launched nearly 80 rockets at Israel on the same day the UN passed a resolution to investigate Israel for war crimes.
It puts the whole burden of the situation on Israel when the current crisis began, when Hamas launched rockets at Israeli cities.
Israel came under fire for attacking the Wafa hospital on Tuesday. The IDF released this footage showing how Hamas used the hospital to shoot at Israel, and a transcript of a phone conversation confirming the hospital was empty.
This use of human shields is extraordinarily cynical, it's grotesque, it's inhuman. But what is equally grotesque is that Israel was condemned in the Human Rights Council. It's a travesty of justice.
Meanwhile, Hamas leader Khaled Mashal said his group is simply defending what he called Palestinian land. Israel emphasized the playing field is not level. Israel gives up the element of surprise and puts its own soldiers at risk by warning Palestinian civilians to leave the places it will attack, while Hamas actually uses their own civilians as human shields. Yet with firepower on its side and footage of devastation on Hamas's side, Israel is often at a disadvantage to present its case.
I think people see the effectiveness of Israel's defense systems, of the Iron Dome, of their warning systems and shelter systems, and they see that as a consequence of those measures that Israel's invested a huge amount of money in, that there are very few casualties on the Israeli side.
Richard Kemp, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan, says it's Hamas, not Israel, that's committing the war crimes.
On the contrary, the Hamas Palestinian side in Gaza, no money's been invested in putting civilians in shelters. And people see footage of casualties and they automatically assume, therefore, Israel must be committing a war crime.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State John Kerry continued his shuttle diplomacy towards reaching a ceasefire.
We have, in the last 24 hours, made some progress in moving towards that goal.
In the meantime, Operation Protective Edge entered its 17th day. Behind me is an IDF artillery battery. Besides hitting targets, Hamas targets inside Gaza, one of the main goals of the IDF remains finding and destroying the many infiltration tunnels dug by Hamas inside Israel.
If there is no border with that, if there is no boundary, if there is no limit to their access, then we are completely exposed and there is no line of defense. It's an unbearable reality.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the Israeli-Gaza border.
Thanks, Chris. I suggested some years ago, and I suggested again, that we pull out, the United States pull out of the United Nations. It is a joke. They live like pashas in luxurious surroundings, being paid sometimes double what our diplomats are being paid. And it is an absolute travesty what they do. And it is so clearly weighted not only against Israel, but against the United States. Why would we pay to have somebody bang us in the head? It's crazy. There should be another organization set up, a council of democratic nations or democracies that leave out some of these dictatorships and get down to something that may really have some good. The World Health Organization does a good job, and other agencies of the United Nations, but few of them do. It's just a joke, and this kind of propaganda thing against Israel is just another outrage. Why should taxpayer dollars from the United States go to fund this nonsense? You know, but people say, oh, you're not for internationalism. Well, of course we're for internationalism, but not that kind. Well, in other news, There's good news for that Christian mother in Sudan who'd been sentenced to death for blasphemy because she converted to Christianity or she married a Christian. Wendy Griffith has that story from the CBN newsroom. Here's Wendy.
That's right, Pat. Miriam Ibrahim, who nearly died for her faith, is now a free woman. She was told she could leave Wednesday after her passport was given back to her. Ibrahim arrived in Italy today following extended time at the U.S. Embassy in Sudan. Her release comes just one day after a congressional hearing about her case. She's married to an American and faced the death sentence for apostasy. But even after her release from prison, authorities prevented Ibrahim from leaving Sudan with her husband and 2 children. Religious rights advocates say her case is just one of many.
She is the tip of the iceberg, that for every one case of Miriam Ibrahim, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of those Sudanese and others that are victims of a draconian implementation of Sharia law that creates an existence for the Sudanese under the leadership of President Bashir that is really an abomination on religious freedom.
The United States needs to show more concern about religious hostility and persecution abroad, in particular the case with Miriam Ibrahim, where I think the response of the United States has been woefully inadequate.
At Wednesday's hearing, New Jersey Republican Chris Smith said the State Department is aggressively promoting gay rights at the expense of religious rights. Smith said many ambassadors and foreign leaders have told him that. The gay rights agenda is what trumps everything in the U.S. foreign policy, so religious freedom, in a way, is seen as an impediment. An ancient Christian community in Iraq is no more. For nearly 2,000 years, the city of Mosul has had a thriving Christian community. Now, Islamic extremists have driven nearly all of them out. As Mark Martin reports, the remaining few could become martyrs.
Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki condemned the attack on Christians in Iraq by the Islamic State extremist group. He said Christians have been exposed to violent acts that have never been witnessed before in Iraq. Sunni militants told them to convert to Islam, pay a tax, or face death.
There are no Christians left in Mosul, Gary. They've all been driven out. They were stripped of all their possessions. They were left with nothing. Their houses, which were stamped Nazarene, meaning Christian, and then stamped again, saying property of the Islamic State. Their cars, even their wedding rings, sometimes with their fingers attached if the rings wouldn't come off.
An official with the Nineveh governor's office says only 25 Christian families remain in Mosul. Al-Maliki has pledged to protect the Christians, but so far his government has been helpless. The director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, Nina Shea, says the Christians are facing a heartless enemy.
They hate Christians. The villages that they have not conquered on the Nineveh area surrounding Mosul, they have turned off their waters. It's 120 degrees in there today. They said to them, "You don't deserve water."
Not only are Islamists targeting believers, they're also destroying all traces of Christianity in the area. Video has surfaced showing Islamists destroying the tombs of biblical prophets Jonah and Seth.
This is a very ancient city that goes back to biblical times. I did see that video as well. They have also captured ancient monasteries from the 4th century, and they are burning the ancient early Christian manuscripts. These are priceless for the heritage of Christianity.
And then there's the refugee crisis. UN officials say around 2 million refugees and internally displaced people from Iraq and Syria reside in the northern Iraqi region of Kurdistan. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Thanks, Mark. Pat, just another example of Christian persecution.
It's worse than that, Wendy. You just ask yourself, where is the outrage? Where is the outrage here in the United States? Where is the outrage? This is an outrageous thing. Can you imagine a fundamentalist Christian organization that moved into someplace in Europe and began to tear down the cathedrals and say, we don't agree with this, it's idolatry, and to kill all the inhabitants who didn't convert to their brand of Christianity? I mean, the world would be in arms about this, but here this group of fanatics, it's just a small group. But this is a result of the feckless policy of the Obama administration, which did not have a status of forces agreement. And this Maliki, who we've allowed to stay in power, who was catering to a few, well, Shias and at the extent of the Sunnis. And his own army was decimated because he'd fired so many leaders. And when it came time to fight, all the men ran. They dropped their weapons and their uniforms and fled because of a few terrorists driving pickup trucks. The whole thing was crazy. We had armed that group to the teeth, but they didn't have the will to fight because Maliki had destroyed their infrastructure. Maliki, he needs to go. But ladies and gentlemen, why are we sitting idly by and letting this happen? Where is the outrage? Some conservative, gets involved in some sex scandal and his headlines all across America. That seems to be what we're concerned about. But what about these Christians in Mosul? There's 2,000 years and they're suffering and they're being persecuted by militant Islamists. Let us name it. Who is doing it? The Islamic people. It's not being done by some errant sect. These are people who are fundamentalist Muslim believers. Wendy.
Thanks, Pat. Well, here at home, the head of the IRS says it may be possible to recover those key emails from Lois Lerner and others in the agency. Emails once thought to be lost for good. They're a key part of an ongoing investigation into the agency's targeting of Tea Party and other conservative groups. John Koskinen confirmed the existence of backup tapes for Lerner's computer hard drive at a hearing on Capitol Hill. Investigators are reviewing the tapes to see if any information can be recovered and shed some light on thousands of Lerner's missing emails. Before she stepped down, Lerner was in charge of the IRS tax-exempt division at the center of the controversy. Her hard drive reportedly was destroyed in 2011 after a computer crash. But House investigators believe the hard drive was just scratched, and most of its contents could have been restored. Republicans accuse the agency of stonewalling and a possible cover-up, which the IRS denies.
The testimony I've given in the past was accurate. As of the time of what I knew, I testified as to what I knew. Right now, the question is, do I know anything more about tapes, backup tapes? And the answer is I don't know any more, other than that the IG is investigating whether there are backup tapes and whether they're in fact recoverable.
Republicans plan to hold another hearing on the targeting scandal next week. And Pat, what a surprise, or not?
Well, I'm not surprised, but I'm a little shocked. We have to have confidence in the IRS. They have control over the most intimate details of your financial dealings. They can subpoena every record you've got. They can put a hold on your bank account. They can put a hold on your earnings. They can foreclose on your property, and they can abuse you horribly. And we trust them, but we can't trust them anymore. This is the most awful scandal that they knew what was going on, and it's just kind of like they're slow walking the whole thing and hope for that the Congress will change and everybody will forget it. We can't forget it. This is a terrible scandal. One more scandal. It goes all the way up to the top to the president. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, when are we going to wake up? Wendy.
Pat, a big majority of overweight kids in America think their weight is okay. That's the finding from a new report from the Centers for Disease Control. About 81% of overweight boys and 71% of overweight girls think their weight is just about right. Researchers warn that means kids won't do what they need to do to lose the weight. And if they don't, they could face potentially serious health problems in the future. Pat, both kids and adults have to recognize they have a problem before they're going to do something about it, I guess.
I heard somebody who went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "You are obese." And his wife said, "You know, that doctor hurt his feelings." Tough luck. What kind of doctor would not tell the man he's got a problem? He's going to have high blood pressure, diabetes, heart condition, is going to die 20 years early. Don't you think doctors ought to tell people things like that? Isn't it about time we wake up? But oh no, we're too busy playing video games and texting each other.
Pass the cupcakes.
Pass the cupcakes, that's right. You know, we've had those dear ladies make cupcakes, and you think, well, you're killing people with those delicious cupcakes. And, you know, they remember the cupcake ladies? They're
yes, I do.
Charming ladies. No, I'm all for them, but They're killing us.
Muslim fundamentalists carried out a plot to take over some schools in Britain. Government investigators say there was an effective takeover of a number of schools in Birmingham. The report found a coordinated, deliberate, and sustained action by several people to introduce intolerant and aggressive Islamic views. That raises fears that students could be turned into radicals. But investigators didn't find evidence of violent extremism or terrorism. A federal judge has declared Colorado's voter-approved gay marriage ban unconstitutional. Judge Raymond P. Moore put his ruling on hold to give the state a chance to appeal, possibly to the Supreme Court. But some clerks have already started issuing marriage licenses to gay couples. And you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.